Hey, this is Jefferson Calico, and we're going to be spending a few minutes talking about the divine feminine. Now, this is a very important topic in Hinduism, and it's covered in your book in chapter 3 on Hinduism in a section called Worship and the Divine Feminine, Devi, which is D-E-V-I. This is the word in Hinduism for a goddess or a sacred feminine. Now, this may be a topic that's a little bit unfamiliar to many of us. It's covered pretty well in this section, but briefly in your book, which mentions several aspects of the divine feminine and mentions briefly several of the goddesses who are venerated in Hinduism. So what I wanted to do is step back a little bit and talk about the divine feminine a little bit more broadly, and then look at very briefly, a few of the deities in Hinduism. So let's get right to it. Okay, so to start off, there are 4 very important characteristics of the divine feminine that we want to talk about very briefly. So this first one is simply that the divine feminine is a very common element of most and many theistic religions. So you find the divine feminine often in the form of goddesses, but also in other forms, female energy and other things. In many different religions, in all times and places. So it's a very common aspect of religious life. So that said, the second characteristic is that in monotheistic religions, especially those that emphasize or talk about God in masculine terms, okay? The divine feminine is often downplayed, and in some cases could even be seen in very negative ways. So a couple of religions or a couple of religious examples where the divine feminine may be downplayed would be Sunni Islam, in which there's probably no real understanding of the divine feminine. And also one we may be more familiar with is most forms of Protestant Christianity downplay or eliminate altogether the traditional Protestant Christianity, downplay or eliminate altogether the divine feminine. Now, that said, so they emphasize God as Father, Son, Spirit, and use the masculine pronoun for God, and are wary or suspicious of goddesses and talking about the sacred in terms of the feminine. So, but that said, even in Sunni Islam, while there is no divine feminine, there are important female figures, historical figures. For instance, Fatima, who is a daughter of Muhammad and the wife of an important imam in Shia Islam, is the Imam Ali, has a very important role, especially in maybe Shia Islam. And then in Christianity, of course, you have the figure of Mary, the Virgin Mary, Mary the mother of Jesus. And so while certain aspects of those religions may downplay the divine feminine, there's often still a feminine role or figure in even these religions. Okay. So it's a very common aspect of religion. It's downplayed in some monotheisms. And then we just want to say that, number 3, that the divine feminine can take very diverse roles, forms, and functions in religion. So the mother goddess may be the most common form of perhaps the divine feminine, some sort of a mother goddess. But as we'll see in Hinduism, there are a number of other different forms that may be just as prominent and just as important, and we'll get to those. So a 4th characteristic of the divine feminine is that any manifestation, any particular, so I'm really talking here about a particular goddess, but any sort of manifestation of the divine feminine in and of itself may take on a number of different roles or appearances or qualities. And to see that, we'll see that a little bit in Hinduism maybe, but let's just take for a moment the figure of Mary in Catholic Christianity. And what we see is that she appears in, or is approachable in a number of different ways. So we have, for instance, the Virgin Mary. And the Virgin Mary is, of course, pure and innocent and submissive to the power of God that overcomes her innocence and is used by God in these special ways. And so that's one way to approach the figure of Mary as the Virgin. And then on the other hand, we have Mary, the mother of Jesus. So in this sense, she still has these qualities of purity, but now she's a mother, and that's a whole different way of understanding Mary and even of approaching Mary. So as a mother, right, she's very approachable. She embodies caring and understanding. She's this comforting and healing presence. So Mary is the mother. And then on the other hand, you have Mary. This sort of draws on her role as a mother, but it is Mary as the intercessor. And these divine feminine characters often take on this role as perhaps an intercessor between humanity with our needs and a masculine sort of God who may not be quite as approachable as the caring mother. So Mary acts as an intercessor. She is close to Jesus and can intercede on our behalf in that way. And then on the other hand, you have another understanding of Mary. Mary is the Queen of Heaven. And so in this, these divine feminine figures often take this is sort of a high and exalted form of the divine feminine as queen. So in this sense, she sort of preserves and even represents the order of the cosmos and holds this together, and so she's the Queen of Heaven. So another aspect of the divine feminine that isn't readily associated with Mary, who's a virgin, is the aspect of fertility. So fertility as a feminine quality or as a goddess is associated with sexuality. So these are goddesses who may be very sexual and in their presentation, may have sexual features emphasized and is very alluring. And as that fertility goddess, then an example may be in Greek mythology may be, for instance, Aphrodite, who's a goddess of sexuality and beauty. On the other hand, that fertility aspect can also be associated with aspects of reproduction, not just sexuality, but reproduction. So this goddess is maybe associated, the goddess of fertility is associated with childbearing and children. And also maybe associated, there may be an earth aspect to this. So the goddess of fertility may be associated with the earth, and associated with the fertility of the earth, which brings forth crops to nourish her children. And in some ways also may be fertility associated with abundance, or maybe luck, good luck and financial wealth. So a goddess, also a fertility goddess, may also be a goddess of abundance. And an example of this from Greek mythology may be the goddesses like Gaia or Demeter, who are earth goddesses and associated with the fertility of the earth. Now, another important aspect of the divine feminine, which may seem counterintuitive, but is very important in Hindu spirituality, is the fierce side. So the goddess as warrior, fierce warrior, and protector protectress. And there are a number of goddesses in Hinduism, but especially the goddesses Durga and Kali, who are associated with this fierce, warlike, even military aspect or function. So the goddess Durga, for instance, is far from some sort of subservient female deity. Instead, she's very powerful. She rides a lion, and she goes into battle to fight against the demons that are attacking the order of the cosmos. And similarly with Kali, she is a female deity in its fiercest form, who is very aggressive and goes into battle and destroys her enemies and gets drunk on the blood of her enemies. So this is another aspect, again, not so common, not associated with Mary for sure, but very important part of Hindu spirituality. So I'd just like to quickly focus on 3 Hindu goddesses who illustrate various aspects of the divine feminine. So the first one is very important in Hinduism. Her name is Sri Lakshmi, or just Lakshmi. She is a consort or wife to Vishnu. In that role, she is a devoted wife, subservient to her husband. She manifests herself as a helper to her husband in all his different avatars that he takes. But she's also seen as a very auspicious goddess, deity. So she's really known to be very effective in driving away evil forces and demons. And she's one who is known to bring good luck and prosperity, and so she's really venerated in this way in Hinduism as an auspicious figure who you want to be involved with because she brings good luck and prosperity. So I just want to read this quote. In one of the myths associated with Lakshmi, it tells us that when she sat down next to the god Indra, he began to pour down rain, and the crops grew abundantly. Cows gave milk. All beings enjoyed prosperity, and the earth flourished. So here we see Lakshmi almost in this fertility sense as one who brings great prosperity and luck to those who venerate her. So another very important goddess is named Saraswati, and her unique function is that she's associated with the function of speech. And this is very, very important in Hinduism because in Hinduism, speech, or the vibrations of speech, are associated with sort of the cosmic energy. So if you're familiar with the idea of a mantra in Hinduism, especially the mantra, the cosmic mantra, a syllable, the cosmic syllable, which is Om, right? The Om syllable, which is that cosmic vibration from which all things come. So speech is understood as a very powerful force or energy in Hindu cosmology, and this is embodied in Saraswati. And so she's also associated, then, because of her association with speech, with human culture, poetry, storytelling, and also various intellectual studies, intellectual pursuits, and communication. And so she's also often given venerated at the beginning of the school year as the goddess who promotes intellectual achievement and learning. So one of the most famous in northern India of the goddesses is named Durga, and she embodies this fierce quality of the goddess. The story goes that there is a demon with his demon hordes who's attacking the cosmos, and he's overwhelming the power of the gods. Evidently, he has this power that he can only be defeated by a woman, and so he's overwhelming all the gods. And they become very angry at the idea that this demon king might conquer them. So they grow very angry, and they emit, all the gods emit their fiery energy of light and heat, and it comes and sort of congeals into this fiery ball, and out of this light, this ball of energy, emerges the form of this woman, and this is the goddess Durga. And each of the gods give her a weapon, so she's well armed. She's got the Vishnu's discus, and she's got this trident of Shiva, and the bow and arrows and swords, and the mace of power. And so the gods arm her and then give her as her vehicle or her animal a lion, and then she rides into battle, and she alone is able to defeat the demon. And this is celebrated every year in the festival of Navratri. So one of the most interesting of the divine feminine figures, the goddesses in Hinduism, is that of Kali. And she in many ways is the opposite of everything else we've been talking about. She takes the fierce form of the goddess and increases it exponentially. So all the things that you might associate with the other goddesses, even in terms of like feminine beauty, which they all have this beautiful aspect, and even in the fierce goddess Durga has a very sort of appealing and beautiful form, Kali throws all that out the window. And she appears as this gaunt and ferocious, violent female figure with her wild hair and her sharp teeth dripping blood, her tongue lolling out of her mouth, and she doesn't fight in sort of a control way, but she is out of control. She's just in this sort of ecstatic battle fury, almost like a berserker. And so she's almost out of her mind in her fury. She's Kali just means dark, so she's the dark goddess, and she's often called the formless one because in her dark appearance, she is like beyond form. She takes no beautiful form, no form at all, and she sort of embodies this idea of the sort of the hungriness of and ferocity of death. That death swallows up life. So she's very fearful in that way. But at the same time, for those who are able to draw close to her, she brings liberation and protection. So the weapons, yes, she wields weapons in this violent fury, but they're against the demons. And she has this skirt of severed human arms, but that's to show us that she severs the effect of karma and frees us from bondage to karma. So she is, while she is wild and ferocious and terrible at the same time, if you're able to draw close to her, then she liberates you, brings freedom in life.